All right, guys, so once again, it's that late season time period. Late season, I'm gonna be honest with you guys, it's a pretty simple time to hunt. It is a food to bed, bed to food pattern. So once you have that bedding area picked out, now you need to figure out that food source. There's a lot of different food sources actually that are gonna be super popular and that you need to be hunting late in the year in order to have success. Are you the public land guy or the big woods guy who's hunting, where you don't have agriculture? There's food sources that maybe you're not familiar with that you need to be hunting. Are you the guy who's in ag country? Which food source should you be hunting that you planted early? Should you plan to plant, next year so that you have an attractive food source? A lot of times, guys, late season is a time in which bucks finally show up to a property after they've been gone all year because you have the food source. So if you have that food source and if you have the bedding area, the food source is almost more important this time of year, but if you have the correct food source, you're gonna have the deer, plain and simple. So what food sources should you really focus on? I'm gonna leave the big woods, the timber food sources till the end. And those are ones that everybody can absolutely benefit from, whether you have agriculture or not, because those are supplemental food sources that you could possibly be hunting in transition areas on the way to the food source. And I'm gonna get to those, but let's go with a little bit more obvious, the more well-known, the more talked about ones. Late season food sources, let's talk about the greens first. The greens, your broadleaf plants, your radishes, turnips. A lot of times your radishes get hit a little bit earlier. Purple top turnips, your rape, your brassicas. A lot of times those are great food sources for you to plant. In that late summertime period and a super attractive food source for deer to be hitting. A lot of times those are super attractive on those warmer-ish winter days, depending on what you have going on in your area. So if you have agriculture, you have soybeans, you have corn, you have things like that standing, deer are probably gonna hit those green food sources a little bit more on those warmer days. If, let's say, that's the only thing you have is those green food sources, there's no other ag around, they'll hit them regardless of how cold it is. Why do I say that? A lot of times those green plants that are high in moisture content are frozen. It's plain and simple is that. And when they're frozen like that, they're hard to eat. They're not as palatable. They're just hard to eat for those deer. So if they have no other choice and it's the only food source around, they're gonna be there. But otherwise, let's say you have a couple different food sources on your property. You planned for this. You got, the grain, you got the green. Chances are they might hit that green a little bit more when it's a little bit warmer and it's not like they're chewing on a rock. Because when water freezes, guys, you got ice. And if you got any sort of high moisture content within these green plants and it freezes, well, it's just hard for a deer to chew. And ultimately, they're spending calories just to gain calories by eating and chewing on these different types of brassicas, the rape, the turnips, the radishes, whatever's left. Especially if it's bad enough to a point where they're getting down to where they're actually eating the bulbs of some of these plants that do produce bulbs. So the green food source, definitely important. You need to be able to factor in when you should be hunting that food source and ideally have that food source late in the year. Another food source that I like to go and plant on my private properties is, let's just call it grain. Okay, the soybeans and the corn. Now, guys, those are just attractive. Let's face the facts. They're high in carbs, high in protein. Depending on which one you're hunting over, they're just attractive. If you can keep your deer off them early, which is hard to do with soybeans, and you might have to fence them off and wait till late season to even open them. If you have these different food sources on your property, you're gonna have the deer. Especially if you have the biggest plot, you have more food than your neighbors, or you can supplement this food with the correct bedding area. Maybe your neighbor even has a little bit better food, but if you got the right bedding and enough food for them, they're gonna be there. So having grain and the greens is definitely important. And any sort of combination with those is not gonna hurt anything because you're giving yourself more opportunity to hunt different stand locations late in the year instead of going and wearing out that same old soybean plot or that same old corn plot. If you have these plots together, which they can actually be planted together, or they're separate, you're giving yourself more variety, you're giving the deer more variety, it's a little bit easier to hunt. Now, I'm gonna go back for a second. I talked about planting these together. There is a way and there's a method, and I go a little more in depth about it in a different video, how to plant these food plots all in one location so that all the food is concentrated in one area. You can absolutely no-till drill or plant, let's say, a grain in spring and broadcast over the top with the correct seeding rate, which it's kind of a science getting it right, during food plot season, and ultimately have the grain and green all in one food plot. So that's something you guys might want to try. I do have another video for that one. Let's go to more of the big woods or the wooded timber type of hunting. Like I said, this can be used for private land hunters who are hunting transition areas or want to push back a little closer to that bedding to ultimately get these deer in daylight, because sometimes they don't make it to the food source until dark. So let's say you want to go back and you want to hunt those transition areas, or you're the big woods guy. You're the guy who's just hunting public land and you're trying to find late season food. Now, if you're not butting up to agriculture or something like that, it can be tough. And a lot of times people don't even know what to look for. This is my favorite, and I honestly think the most overrated food source that you could possibly be hunting late season in a timber scenario. It's locust pods. Guys, locust pods, for those of you that are unfamiliar, come from a locust tree, and they almost look like a giant snap bean or a big bean, okay? Deer will annihilate these things. The first time I ever hunted, and I want to say it was Missouri, it almost looks like they have a banana in their mouth. They were just annihilating these things and transitioning. Once again, this was a transition area. They were hitting these locust pods on their way to the destination food source. Picking up on that allowed me to get in there in that transition area and kill a deer, like I said, before they ever made it to that food source, the destination food source, because they weren't making it there in time. So now keying in that they were hitting these locust pods, that allowed me to have success. And like I said, you might not always have the destination food source, but they might be meandering similar to the way they would be earlier in the year for acorns for these locust pods late in the year. So locust pods, locust trees, always something that I want to focus on late in the year. Along with those acorns, the chestnuts, the other nut-bearing trees that have still dropped and have not been consumed yet. If you can find those, also a super attractive, palatable, good food source to hunt over. So you don't necessarily have to be the private land guy with all the food plots, guys. If you got these other species of trees that are going to be dropping these nut-bearing fruits or the locust pods or things like that, you can kill a deer on a late season pattern. You just got to know what you're looking for. And now you do, guys. So pay attention to those locust pods, the nut-bearing trees, the acorns and the chestnuts. Everybody knows those, but pay attention to those locust pods. And if you're the private land guy and you can get the right food source in the summertime, in the springtime, that's always going to work too. Regardless, either or, there's always a way that you can kill a late season deer, guys.